Hey, I'll be covering my review on Chapter 4 and what I think about the story and the gameplay of Chapter 4. And this will not include the Mirror Dungeon 2 and Mirror Dungeon Hard Mode. They'll be coming out around a week later. So maybe I'll give my thoughts on that when it comes out. And of course, it will include spoilers for Chapter 4. So if you have not played Chapter 4, probably just play Chapter 4. And it's pretty easy, so you should be able to get to it no problemo, even with IDs that aren't that good. So I would like to talk about the story first. So there's a lot of cool world building in Chapter 4. We get to see about K-Corp's history, get to see about Stephanet, and we get to even explore beyond the outskirts. I thought that was really cool. You actually get to explore a wish-granting monster or whatever beyond the outskirts. I thought that was really interesting. So far, what we've seen from the outskirts is just ruins, and there are wild tier creatures that fixers and whatnot and have to deal with, and there are relics out there. I remember the Ring and the Pinky were fighting over something in the ruins, some singularity, and now we have learned about a wish-granting monster that can turn people into maybe abnormalities or something more than that. And we see these form singularities. Maybe other corporation singularities were found in the outskirts. Maybe they were derived from the outskirts too. And we notice that a lot of these singularities are all creatures. We see the smoke monster from L Corp. We see the K-Corp singularity, and we also see Carmen L Corp singularity, the new L Corp singularity, which is her brain or whatever. And we also saw about the plans for Damien and the blue team. The blue team and the red team. The red team in the Limbus company trailer, you see a red team and a blue team. The red team is, you see Herman, who wants to destroy these mirror worlds from what we see in Chapter 4. And we see Damien, who probably wants to protect them. So they seem to stand on opposite sides. And so it's giving more information about the Limbus company's story going forward. I thought that was really interesting, and I hope to see more of that. And we got a lot of development on what the mirror worlds do. It doesn't seem to be an alternate dimension, it's more of possibilities. So you manifest someone's possibilities. And you also got to see a lot of references to the wings, which I thought was really cool. So we got to see in the Chapter 4 Dungeons map. It's a reference to some of the chapters of the wings. The map itself is a reference to the wings. I thought that was pretty keynote. And of course, the final boss being a farmer. When I saw the final boss being a farmer, I was shouting at the screen, Kino, it's actually a farmer! It's a farm! Final boss being a farmer has more meaning because, Yi Sang, if you know about farmers and Yi Sang's book, The Wings, you know if you know. You just know. It's funny if you know. It's really funny. Just read The Wings. It's a pretty good book. And from a literary perspective, there's some really cool moments. You see the ending song where Yi Sang looks up from his mirror and then everything starts to color. And you also see the photo in the background which contrasts the sinners looking like a family. And if you notice, the ending song in each chapter progresses, where at the start the sinners look a bit distant, and now in chapter 4, the ending song looks a lot brighter and the sinners look a lot closer, and the saturation is a lot brighter too. But I'm not sure whether that's localized to chapter 4, but I think it's a lot brighter, like the saturation is a lot higher, which gives it a lot of like color. And you also get to see Dombikes, like the spice bushes blooming all around, which signifies a new beginning or a return to the times where Yi Sang like found just the joy of creating things with a bunch of friends. Is that he has the same feeling there. That's why Dombikes spice bushes were all over the ending song. I really like that. It's actual literary genius. I knew Project Moon. I actually knew. The weird part about the ending song is that I feel that Yi Sang's singing was a bit too mixed. There's like too much filtering in his singing, but I think they tried their best. So honestly, it's fine. I think it's still really cool. I really like the rapping part too, and I think they did their best with that. So honestly, it's not that big of a deal. And also, there's this hidden detail where Virgilius lets like everyone pick out food. Like they at the end of chapter 4, they went to a diner. So in chapter 1, they didn't have any food because they failed to retrieve the golden bowl. And then in chapter 2, I remember that Rodion bought everyone food. I think I think Rodion bought everyone food. And then in chapter 3, we got Virgilius treated everyone with kebabs. And then chapter 4, everyone just went to a diner. So it's upgrading. And also there are a lot of literary themes, like how there's themes about technology being for fun and for others. Dongrang wanted to save animals with his healing technology. He wanted to save animals. Maybe with healing you could have saved thousands, maybe even millions of lives. But you lose the commercialization aspect, loses the fun you had just creating stuff with friends. So there's a contrast there with no real right answer. And there are some cool story details that we didn't see, like how Virgilius could actually hear Dante the entire time, and he was just acting. At the end of chapter 4, Virgilius just blows off that he couldn't hear Dante when he clearly could, when even replying to his exact message. Also, there's some cool world building related to T-Corp's factories. It feels like they're going to an eternal industrial revolution because they can use time technology that accelerates time. So they can increase workers' productivity multiple folds. We also got information about S-Corp being like in absolute hell, even worse than T-Corp, which saying something. And also some cool story detail that many might have not noticed, that chapter 4's dungeon was filled with gloom and gluttony per cat. I have no idea how to pronounce that. So those little things, those abnormalities that are just representations of sin typings that are really easy to kill. A lot of people were confused on why those easy mobs were in chapter 4's dungeon. I feel that they were there on purpose as a narrative decision. I think they could have been upgraded, but it's fine. It is what it is. They were there because it relates to Yi Sang's story. It resonates with Yi Sang. Yi Sang's sins are both gloom, and Dongrang's is gluttony. So both being there, like they resonated with both of them. And we haven't seen an envy version yet, so there might be in Heathcliff's chapter, since he's a representation, or his main sin typing seem to be envy and lust. There are some really hype moments, like big reveal moments in chapter 4, which I really like. So One of the most obvious ones is the K-Corp singularity, being or that boy who got turned into the eyeball creature in the outskirts. He wished to cry for the human race in order to benefit them, and now he's being forced to watch live leaks for 24/7 and cry. And then there's of course Samjo's dive. That was memed upon the funniest death in Project Moon history. Some people didn't like it because it wasn't that serious, but it was at least memorable. If you've been killed off in like a semi-serious way, like maybe he sacrificed himself, I don't think it will be as memorable as the leap of faith. And then we of course have Dongrang just randomly name dropping Carmen in the middle of his speech. Now we have direct confirmation that Carmen is the one distorting everyone. And maybe Ayin is the one that helps everyone manifest ego. We don't know that yet. At the end of chapter 4, we have Dante's clock ticking to midnight. And I think it's a reference to the doomsday clock. Once it strikes midnight, humanity is going to face impending doom, something like that. And it might be a reference to chapter 1's doomsday clock abnormality. And I'm looking forward to what will happen when the clock strikes 12. And there is the most keynoteest moment of all in chapter 4. There is Fly Perfect Wings. The most keynote moment that made so many people cry and bawl. Man, Yi Sang, the one that made the moment that made Yi Sang everyone's favorite character. Like the moment after that played, I played the Melee song. I played it for 5 hours straight. Man, absolute keynote. I hope they do more of that. Maybe in chapter 5. And lastly, I actually want to talk about the gameplay. So a lot of new gameplay mechanics they introduced, or like sanity in Abno fights, which I thought was pretty cool. So syncing is actually really useful now, other than just dealing gloom damage. And the ultimate keynote, 7 sinners. That the moment when they just announced 7 sinners, I had a poggers face. I was like, fuck yes! 7 sinners, what? So many possibilities. What if there are 12 sinners? What if you just go to Dante's chapter and then suddenly 12 sinners? Let's go! And now we'll get to the one part of chapter 4 that I really didn't like, which is the balance. The fights in chapter 4 are way too easy. You don't have to really interact with their mechanics to do anything. And I feel like this is because the ego resources being carried over made it so much easier. Even if ego resources didn't carry over, it would still be that much easier. Just ego resources just exacerbated the situation. The only hard abnormality from chapter 4, the dungeon at least, is the fox. If you didn't do it without ego, like what I did, it's on the channel right now, it's decently difficult. But other than that, the rest, and it doesn't really have a lot of health, so you can just Unga it down. It's the same with the rest of the abnormalities. So for the fairy gentleman, he didn't have a lot of health, you can just Unga him down. You didn't have to really interact with the non-clashable mechanic, because it didn't really do a lot of damage. The fairy gentleman would just be destroyed before he did anything. You never have to interact with it. And it's the same with the talisman guy. Honestly, so that no one will cry, that's the name of the abnormality, is the weakest abnormality in the entire chapter 4 dungeon, because he doesn't really do anything, and the moment where he does something, which is the one where the phase where he uses a lot of gloom skills that roll really high, he's already dead. He just doesn't do anything. It's the same with the electric centipede. Might even be weaker than the talisman guy. Might even be weaker. Because he just doesn't do anything. All he does is survive a bit longer. He doesn't clash that high. And there's really no threat from him at all. even if he does win a little bit of a few clashes, you can just heal it right back with like pursuance or whatnot, since you have so many ego resources. And you don't really have to care about sanity in any of the fights. The fox is the only fight you have to care about sanity. But you don't really have to care when you can just fluid sack every turn. Faust fluid sack every turn. And heal everyone's sanity. Maybe even Sun Shower Yisang every turn. Just destroy all the umbrellas very easily. So ego makes that fight completely a non-issue at all. And it's the same with all the base egos, since they cause 0 sanity. From what I remember, all of them cause 0 sanity. It's just not issue. You can just use them to win all of your clashes, so you don't have to get a single stack of sinking at all. If you're just having trouble, just press ego and you just win all the clashes. No problem at all. And it's the same with, I thought the final boss, both final bosses, Dongwang's distorted form and his ego form, just didn't roll high enough for it to be a threat. He also had sanity, so if you drop his sanity low enough, if you had Spice Bush Yisang, and you had to use him in every fight anyway, you're probably using Spice Bush Yisang, since he was the banner at that time, and he was really good, so everyone probably would have gotten him. Inflicted sinking, which just made the Dongwang fight, even easier. I just hope they make fights harder, so the bosses and the abnormalities can feel like a threat in the dungeon. At least make them a threat. If the bosses are too easy, it negatively affects your enjoyment of the story, since they don't feel that much of a threat. The sinners can just brush them off without any difficulty, so they're not actually overcoming any challenge. And the one complaint is that everyone has is that there are a lot of monotonous fights like those human fights at the long stretch of part 1 and the robot fights in part 1 and the ego people fights in part 2. The long stretch with barely any story. Absolutely a slog to get to, since they're just the same fights over and over again. You don't really have to interact with their mechanics so much. You just have to outclash them and just unga them down. So it was not really that fun. And there were so many of them. I got really tired after a while. But honestly, it's fine if the quality of Chapter 4 story is that good. And I would like to give my overall rating on Chapter 4. So I think the world building is amazing, really solid. I really like the story, the literary references, and the small details that allude to something greater, the foreshadowing, the really hype moments. All of these makes Chapter 4 probably the best of all of the chapters so far. So my rankings would be Chapter 4, Chapter 1, then Chapter 2, then Chapter 3. And the gameplay is very subpar in Chapter 4. Definitely not as hard as Chapter 3, because we didn't have underlevel identities, and we didn't... When Chapter 3 dropped, we didn't know that much about the game. So the difficulty in Chapter 4 is rather lackluster. I was just hoping they bump the difficulty a lot. The enemies need to have like +5. The abnormality fights, abnormalities need to have like +5 clashing power in order to stand a chance against our sinners, especially with the greater ego resources. Yeah, so this chapter is like a solid 6 to a 7 out of 10. And I really hope Project Moon can keep up this level of quality and maybe even exceed it in the future. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say. And that's my review for Chapter 4. And goodbye.